the Garden Like a Groove Show, and I'm your host, Tyhson and Banighen, a permaculture instructor, and with me is my lovely co-host, Sarah Bradshaw, the one and only garden guru herself, when we're interested in helping you learn how to garden like a guru and take back your own garden and grow vegetables, berries, and fruits. And we're getting close to the winter, and we really need to get ready. So, Sarah, what's happening planetary-wise, and what's up this week? What's with the stars?
Well, we got a pretty busy week. Not quite as busy, crazy as last week was, but of course today the Mercury goes retrograde, and we're going to come back and talk about that a little bit, and how to maybe get more use out of a Mercury retrograde. Today we're in Gemini, and we go void a course about 9 o'clock this evening. Now, void a course is a great time to do all sorts of stuff. It's just not a good time to plan or to start executing things, and it can be a little chaotic for business dealings at times, unless both parties are really, really grounded. Often, if you're planning something, and you look at your date book and you go, oh, I'm planning a party. The moon is void, of course, right now. Planning stuff might not work. The party might not ever happen. But if you're planning a party, and the moon's in a solid, grounded state, and when the party is going to take place is when the moon is void, of course, that could actually work really, really well, because voids are a very, very good time to socialize and let yourself kind of drift with the energy. So anything that you get going today, feel free to just kind of continue it right up to your bedtime. It's all good, once you've started something. But, if you come out of your after dinner nap or relaxation period, all right, it's time to get something going. Maybe not. Maybe give yourself a little bit of time, get yourself grounded. Now, the moon's going to come into Cancer tomorrow, early in the morning. Cancer, as we've discussed before, is such a good planting sign. Now we're in that final quarter, because tomorrow at about 6 o'clock in the evening, about 12 hours after we enter Cancer, we're going to hit that, entering into the fourth quarter of the moon phase. So if you want to do some planting of trees and shrubs and that, your only window in Cancer this time is right in that from 6 o'clock and 6:30 in the morning till about 7 o'clock tomorrow night. Then we're into the fourth quarter, and you have to really have good luck happening with you to plant successfully in the fourth quarter. The moon's deep in its dark phase now. It's getting ready to come to the new. It's almost dormant in a lot of ways. And, so Wednesday, we're going to be in Cancer. A good time to harvest any of your seeds for leafy, ferny, above ground kind of things. Harvest your herb seeds, harvest your lettuce seeds, harvest any of your seeds for kind of leafy greens. Check your kale. Are the seeds ready yet? My kale hasn't really set seed properly yet. Some kale, if you planted it early enough, you might actually have seeds yet.
How about grapes? Are you saying like grapes need to be planted during this short period of time before?
Or you can wait until like about a full week when the moon's gone new.
Right. Okay.
Great planting energy.
Yeah.
If you can't get it in tomorrow during the day, just cool your jets and wait for that little bit of time. Won't be long.
Right.
We're
between, what did you say? Say that again. Between
6:30 in the morning and 7 o'clock in the evening.
Okay, so all day.
all day. Yeah,
All day. All day. All right.
all day. Now, interestingly, in Thursday, we get kind of the opposite. We get an entire daytime day that is void of course on Thursday. The moon is still in Cancer, but it's going to go void of course at about 10:08 Thursday morning. And it's going to stay there till almost 6 o'clock Thursday evening. So if those are hours that you're running your business, or you got business responsibilities and that, just be prepared for things to maybe not go quite the way you expected them to. The void can create interesting things. Then of course, Friday we're hitting a whole new month. Interestingly enough, that doesn't make much difference in astrology. We pay much more attention to the moon cycle. I laugh at my friends who are from Asia when we get talking, because I'm much more in tune with their lunar calendar a lot of times than I am with our calendar in terms of the months and that. But once for Thursday evening, we go into Leo. So Friday, Saturday, and into Sunday, we're in Leo in the fourth quarter. So we've got all this fire energy combined with this almost defunct moon energy. This is definitely not a good time to plant. It is a fabulous time to harvest, to do any fall pruning that you might want to do your soil prep, to get beds ready for the following year, and especially to clear out any kind of things you don't want, things that you're going to weed and burn, things that you're going to cull out of the garden, things that you want to eradicate from your garden. This is an excellent time to do it. The moon's going to go void, of course, around 5 o'clock Saturday evening, and it'll enter Virgo 1:30 on Sunday morning. Now, a lot of people struggle with the beginning to understand some of the things about astrology and the moon phases and that. And part of that is because we have a couple of differences in how calendars are set up. And if you take a look at an almanac or a date book, like our Wise Woman Seeds date book that we have, if you take a look at it and you take a look at the calendars that we have, these are what are called geocentric calendars or date books. And so they are taken, everything in them is taken into account from the Earth's perspective. Now, there's another way to set up a calendar where you simply work the times and everything out as to where the sun is, and no attention paid to where the Earth sits in this. It's more like an entire solar system calendar, whereas this is very much the Earth calendar. And so there are a few differences in there. One is how the moon phases are defined. Now, a lot of times when you look at a calendar, you'll see that it says, new moon, first quarter, full moon, third quarter, and that's it. Now, that in one sense is true, that in terms of the solar system calendar. But if you take a look, can that be seen, Mel?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So we have new moon, and on our calendar, the new moon until the second quarter is called the first quarter. Then the moon looks like a crescent and a half moon. And from there till the full, that is what we call the second quarter. Mm. The full to the next crescent half moon is the third quarter. And the one that goes, the period of time that goes from that moon configuration to the new moon is called the fourth quarter. And so this is a much clearer way of defining where the moon is. It first is moving through that first quarter and coming up to that quarter moon. And then it's going to move to that full moon, and then it's going to move to the last crescent moon. Now, it pays when you're looking at this and you're learning this to remember that the moon says dock. Okay, when it starts as a new moon, it looks like the letter D. And when it gets to the half moon phase of that, it truly looks like the letter D. Then it rounds right out to your full moon, and then it looks like the letter C. So the moon, as it moves through the phases, says dock. And that's immensely useful when you're getting used to timing things from the moon. Like, I know people will look up and go, oh, the moon's like half full, but they really have no idea whether it's growing or shrinking. They are conscious of that. Now, the new moon and the full moon are kind of our times of extreme. You're going to get the harbinger. New moon's the harbinger of the new kind of cycle of weather. So when the moon is new, you're going to get a taste of kind of what is to come. When it hits the full, you're going to experience that in its fullness, usually in its most intense. But those quarters, those times when the moon looks like that half circle, those can be incredibly balanced times, and they can have a really gentle feel of everything kind of just being right on track. We often notice, if you pay attention, that there's a little bit less craziness in the world when the moon is in that balanced state. The full moon, I think part of the problem with the full moon is it keeps us so wide awake at times that, it kicks off certain things for us. But, the more I garden and the more I play with the land and the plants, the more I realize the importance of understanding the rhythmic cycles in the world. And the first one that's easiest to kind of grasp a hold of and get a real understanding for is actually the moon. Once you get a handle on, what the moon's doing and how it progresses through the year, then it's a little easier to start adding some of the other components to understanding the wheel of the year. We go from solstice in the winter through equinox in the spring to solstice in the summer to equinox in the fall to solstice in the winter, in this endless circle around and around and around. And in between those solstices and equinoxes, about every 6 weeks, there is another day of significance that are the cross-quarter days. The one early in February, which can be called Groundhog Day or Imbolc or Candlemas, or it has a few names. Then we get into the equinox and Easter. Easter always, always, always falls on the first Sunday after the first full moon after the equinox, which can now explain to you why it roams all over the map. Yeah. Then, we have the equinox, then we have May Day or Beltane. Then we go to the summer solstice, then we get to Lammas or Lunasa early in August. Then we come around to the equinox. Then we get into, Selene at the end of October. Then that brings us around to the solstice. And slowly, as you learn more and more and more of um, each of these events, each of these cross quarter days, each of these kind of significant things, you'll get a deeper and deeper understanding of, the rhythms of the world. Now, I promised we'd come back to Mercury retrograde, and we're going to, okay? And then when we're done at Mercury retrograde, we're going to talk a little bit about how biodynamics and potentially even how geomancy fits into this kind of understanding of the Earth. So, Mercury retrograde, so many of us see it as a time of frustration and blockages and things getting in the way and things not progressing forward. But there's a time to every season under heaven. And there is a time for Mercury retrograde, and there's a purpose for Mercury retrograde. Mercury is the planet of communication. It's ruled by the god Mercury. It connotes, interaction with each other, sending messages, communicating in general. And so when Mercury retrograde happens, when Mercury actually seems to be standing still, or actually the other planets are moving past it, in this 6-week period of time that it takes to come forward again, this is a time where you really, if you want to make the best use of this, focus on the part of retrograde. Don't think in terms of going forward. This is a time to review. If you're a writer, take out things that you've already written and edit them, review them, redo what you need to do, retreat into yourself and, reevaluate what is important to you. Take this 6-week period of time as your opportunity to retreat a bit from that world, to take that communication inside and not feel so incredibly pressured to spread it all around and share it with people. Like if you use Mercury retrograde in the way that it's intended to be used, it's incredibly healing. It's a time of rest. Again, that RE, rest. Okay, when you rest, you restore yourself. You get a bit of respite from the world. So, think of that when you think of Mercury retrograde, instead of being so frustrated that you can't move forward. Focus on feeling how blessed you are that you get this period of time to slow down and relax a bit and kind of review what's actually going on. Now,
Well,
on
that's 6 weeks, 6 weeks of,
Yep.
And it starts when?
Today.
Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. Wow. I don't know. Hammock time.
Yeah. Yeah. Just relax a bit.
And here I am trying to launch courses and do all that stuff and marketing, and it's the wrong time.
Review everything. Go over everything. Make sure that when you are ready to go forward, you've got it all put out very carefully and together.
Okay, that's a great idea. I like that. So never mind that. Just review it, get it all set up, and polish the apple and make it pretty and do all that. All right.
Yeah, you use the time. Yeah.
What's that? Well, thank you. I don't know which pig we're talking about, but yeah. Yes, sirree. Yeah. Okay. Well, yeah.
Okay.
I think that's one of the things that we're learning, both Michael and myself and Darlene, is that the garden is really teaching you that, like you said, there's a time to sow and there's a time to reap. And there's a time to do absolutely nothing. And in fact, the garden grows better when you take those periods of time, right?
Yeah.
And stop wailing at things and trying to gnash your teeth and get things done.
Yeah. Well, the wise woman healing path is 7 steps, but it's actually 8 steps, because the first step is step 0, and it is do nothing.
When in doubt, do nothing.
Yeah, if you're not feeling good, just don't do anything. Don't take anything. Don't, go to bed, rest, observe. Just right now, don't do anything until you figure out a little bit what's going on. So I always think that that's often a very good starting point for everything. Now, once you start working with earth energies and start getting a real sense of how well things can go, sooner or later, you're going to run across things written by Rudolf Steiner.
Absolutely.
Now, yeah, I know people who, they came to Rudolf Steiner through Waldorf School, and they learn all about Waldorf schools and what wonderful institutes they are and what a great approach it is to education. And then they find out that Rudolf Steiner also is, big in biodynamic agriculture. And it's like, oh, isn't that interesting? And then I know people in the agriculture world who kind of come about it from the opposite direction. Their introduction to Steiner is all about the agriculture, and it's all about, working with the earth energies and the elementals. And then maybe they find out about Waldorf education, or they find out about anthroposophy, which is Steiner's take on philosophical spiritual development, where with anthroposophy, we're not worshiping a man, we're worshiping the ideal of humanity. That, but when you break down and get to really look at and study Steiner, you realize that both the Waldorf School and the biodynamic agriculture are really basically under the head of anthroposophy, that really the man was far more concerned about the spiritual aspect of things and our spiritual progression and doing things in an energetic manner that would benefit both us and the planet. And all the little subsets that we get to know him by indeed are subsets.
Right.
He was a prolific writer.
Yeah, he really was.
He churned, anything that you can get your hands on by Rudolf Steiner is well worth reading and looking into. Keep in mind that you're dealing with somebody who wrote over 100 years ago. So, you are going to encounter, clumsy language and archaic language.
And sexism and all sorts of things, right?
Yeah. But the knowledge is solid, and it's really, really fabulous stuff. And there's a lot of new writings out there on biodynamics and understanding biodynamics and getting a feel for doing the biodynamic preps and putting in place the principles. So, there's stuff out there, and we at Wise Women Seeds have included that information in the journal because it really is the cherry on the cake in terms of putting together a garden. It is taking, the accumulation of astrological information and all of the other earth elemental information that we can possibly kind of document and contain, and really kind of putting it all in one place for people. Now, Tyson, I know that you're a big Steiner fan as well. And that, you know, when you're looking at best use of and best connection with land, that you're talking about using principles of geomancy, you're using dowsing, you're using a variety of things to attract and anchor the right energies in the farm or in your garden. And how's that going for you?
Yeah, it's an ongoing learning experience. I have to be really honest about it, and I think Steiner would agree. Is that when it comes to Mother Nature and learning about your own inner nature and bringing the two together, it's a lifelong study, and there's always something more to learn from nature about our own human nature. So I'd say I'm in a huge learning curve. I mean, every time we go into the garden, why didn't the cabbages do well? Or what happened over there? Or, oh my God, when you prune this way, you get this result. Isn't that incredible? So it's like a body, it's like a living textbook that's continuously educating us about how to do this co-creative relationship with nature. So it's exciting. It's like a living book. And geomancy is really where Rudolf Steiner was the teacher, the lecturer, and you were the student. I would say geomancy is more becoming the student yourself, like becoming the wizard or the wizard in the dress yourself and playing with the magic. So rather than just learning from the master, it's more like applying it and becoming a master. I don't know if that makes sense. It's more.
It makes perfect sense. It actually aligns really, really well with the wise woman path, which,
Yeah,
by the way, you do not need to be a woman to walk. Okay.
right.
The wise woman path is that first you learn for you. Okay. First you learn how to look after yourself, how to cook food, how to take care of yourself. Then that knowledge that you acquire, you apply it to your family and your friends around you. And only when people get to the point where they're seeking you out, not you strutting around with your drum saying I am the healer, but people actually seeking you out and acknowledging within that community and within that circle of people that you know your stuff. And when you look at it in this way, it allows for so much more. Like if you look at our circle of people, we have we have a person in Darlene who excels at the massage, at the hands-on healing, and we all look to her for that. She doesn't have to walk around saying, I do massage. Anybody who in our circle who's had a massage from Darlene says to other people, let Darlene do that. She really knows what she's doing. And people come quite spontaneously to me to learn how to do the salve making or some of the cooking things. And we have, in my circle, I have Darlene and Kate that if I want to learn something new about cooking or food handling or that, like those are my go-to. And when you do it this way, instead of building this hierarchical structure where you have, the teacher at the top and the students fanning down underneath, you have this giant web where people are crisscrossing in a variety of directions. And I don't know if you've ever tried to get through a spider web, but it's one of the strongest constructions on the planet. And and that's sort of what I see us wanting to build, and us potentially building with interlacing these various skills in ways that people can learn to incorporate them.
Yeah, absolutely. So you said a few things that really touched my heart, and that is one is community, is that no one person is going to have all this wisdom and this knowledge around the earth and healing salves and meditation and all the rest. So that's one art aspect, is living in community and sharing resources is really, really beneficial. The other aspect is, I think, is let me just say, silence, is being still long enough to listen to nature and what nature gift has in communicating with you. And if we're so busy doing, it's impossible to hear anything because we're, well, I don't know about you, but try and sneak up on an animal in the forest while you're crashing around, it isn't going to happen, right?
No.
The only way it's going to happen is if you sit under a tree and become one with the tree, and then the animals get curious and they come to you. So that's being silent and asking. Asking is the other aspect, the innocence and of knowing that you don't really know anything, right? And that you're willing to ask so that you receive the answer. I think that's another important part. And while I really love permaculture and I am an instructor, what's missing for me in permaculture is the whole spiritual aspect, which Steiner brings, right? That whole connection with the moon and the stars and the angelic kingdom and the devic kingdom and all that. It's much more mechanical and human oriented and more, well, it's a whole systems design, which comes from engineering, which I respect. I have a master's degree, whole system design. So what I like to think about in all this is I call it eco-spiritual stewardship. It has both the wisdom and knowledge, the practical application of the engineering approach to the landscape, but also listening and tuning into the angelic and the elemental kingdoms.
Right. And that makes so much more sense. But, to go back to permaculture, permaculture has its roots in kind of colonial focused agriculture. So, when Europeans came to North America and colonized, their major focus was to recreate here what they had in Europe. So they brought their crops, they proceeded to plant them. They plowed the prairies, they planted grain, they killed off buffalo, replaced them with beef cattle. They didn't take the time to understand that if they would just slow down and take a look around, that the land was actually producing everything that they needed.
Yeah, the Garden of Eden was already created for them.
Yeah, and I see a certain amount of that in permaculture, that you're going to reform the land, you're going to reformat the landscape, and you're going to make it do what you want it to do.
Without asking.
And the more I work with Indigenous people who are looking at restoring habitat like the Gary Oak Meadows and, the stands of salal berries and, the fields of glacier lilies and that, the more I realize that we need to understand so much more about what was here and how it worked and how it operated and how things were done. Like, it was less than a decade ago that I found out that those circular stone structures that are off the coast of many of the Gulf Islands are indeed elaborate fish traps designed to channel fish out of the river and into these areas where they could be very easily speared and harvested, or the younger ones could be released quite easily without any harm being done to them. So I'm finding that more and more and more I want to find out not so much how to plant a food forest for me, like okay, chestnut trees grow here, so theoretically we should be able to grow edible chestnuts here, and if we incorporate that in our food forest, isn't that a wonderful idea? Well, maybe not.
Right.
Maybe what we should be really planting is the hazelnuts, the other nuts that grew in the area, the various other things. And, I think there's times where we have to really kind of look at what's going on. Now, where I think permaculture can really, really, really shine is when we're looking at regenerative landscape, so you're looking at something that somebody came in, they clear cut all the trees off the hillside. They farmed it for a couple of years. The hillside's depleted and the soil's starting to slump. So then with the engineering expertise and the principles of permaculture, you can come in and you can put swales across that, so when the side's not endlessly washing out, and build them up into terraces, and you can make all these little micro zones, and you can turn something that humans destroyed and made unproductive back into something productive.
Yeah, and that's really true. I've done that work in Mexico where it's, Tepapati, you can't even get a pickaxe through the topsoil, right? From the rainwater, and how do you scarify the land and use goat manure and mixing up with other herbal remedies so that the seeds have a place to get, to literally anchor. And
Yeah.
in Orville International Community, they did that, and they actually brought the water back to the surface of the land. So yeah, that's really regenerative agriculture. And the other aspect
Yeah.
of that is analog forestry, which I learned in Sri Lanka, which is going in, looking at what's the function in the forest that's no longer there, and actually then going to the Buddhist temples, which all of the original plant material is still there because it's sacred, and then looking at the structure of that forest, and then what components can we then bring back to regenerate that which has been desecrated. So desecration is the name of the game, which is ironical because the original food forest took very little effort. It was the Garden of Eden. You just needed to know how to enter it and respect it and know what its cycles were and eat from it, right? And we missed the whole point by trying to change it into something that looked familiar from back home.
Well, one of my native friends one time said to me, you people are just addicted to work. Like you honestly think that if you aren't like busy and breaking a sweat, that there's something wrong with that you're suffering from some lapse in moral function. And I thought about that and realized that there was a certain amount of that, certainly in my family, when
It
I
mine
was,
too. I mean, it was almost
like,
sinning against God. I mean, that's a little dramatic, but in our
but
culture, it
almost,
is.
I remember, my mom would yell upstairs, call me and ask, what are you doing? If I said I was reading, that was seen as a leisure activity, and I could drop that book and she could give me a job to do. By the time I was in grade 3, I realized that if I'd be left alone, because homework was legitimate work, it wasn't recreation. Now, it was a stretch of the truth, but the reality is that if I wrote a book report on that book and handed it in, I actually got credit, so it was, in one sense, homework. But it was also my way of dodging that what you're doing is a waste of time.
Right, right.
And, I think that, we, and if you go to, and you've been in third world countries, so you really get this, that although there can be times of immense busyness where everybody is just hustling like crazy to get the fish out of the nets and onto the racks and dried and packed away and that. But by and large, on a day-to-day basis, there is so much more leisure time than we get.
Try and find anybody in a village at 2 o'clock in the afternoon anywhere in the tropics. You won't find anybody. The streets are vacant.
Yeah.
And everybody's having a nap.
Yeah.
I would think that you're absolutely crazy to be out there, right? You're trying to do something, right?
You are. Yeah, you are. So, as we come through, like the winter is a wonderful time. Fall and winter is a wonderful time to start really looking at some of these theoretical things, going back over your notes, taking note of various things. And it's one of the reasons that I encourage people when they first start, like keeping a journal and looking at their garden, to take note of the astrological days and that, but okay, it's not a good planting day, but it's the only day you got this week. Go ahead and plant, take note of that. At the end of the season, compare how those plants did with the ones that you planted in the astrologically appropriate days. Do your own controls, kind of.
Right. Yeah. Do your own research.
Yeah, like and like really do the research, like really keep the notes, really, and a garden journal can be such a boon for that. I mean, I have journals that I've kept for years and years and years in gardening, and they compare things like the yield of various beans so that I know kind of what's worth growing. I have tomatoes in my collection that I actually say to people, look, it's a terrible plant. It's wimpy and weak and it hardly kicks out any tomatoes, but they taste wonderful, Or it's got to be the scrawniest looking tomato plant you ever saw, but it makes like only about half a dozen tomatoes, but they're this freaking big.
Right.
So I mean, I don't, not everything in my garden is about being the biggest or the most prolific. Sometimes it's being about the tastiest. Sometimes it's being about the most nutritious. Sometimes it's about being the most versatile, like.
And isn't that really something that we've really missed in our culture? We are not into taste anymore. We somehow think that it has to look pretty or big or fat or when we want it, but we've forgotten that what the taste of food is all about. We really have. I mean, take a tomato from our garden and a tomato from the store, and they're two different. They're not even remotely connected taste wise. Like, why would anybody buy a tomato? I mean, I buy tomatoes at the store, but it takes a real smart clip on the back of the head to taste the tomato from the garden and realize what these aren't even a good facsimile of a tomato in the garden. They're terrible.
No, and I decided a long time ago, and for me, the big decision was ice cream. Okay, because I love ice cream. And sometime in the 70s, ice cream started really changing. And, it went from something fairly rare and very expensive to incredibly cheap and absolutely ubiquitous. But it didn't taste good. It didn't, it was sweet. That's all it was. It was cold and sweet. It didn't have flavor, texture, different layers. I mean, it just didn't. And I decided that I didn't want cheap ice cream at, a couple of bucks a gallon. That to me, ice cream was such an amazing treat that I would rather only have it a couple of times a month and have the really good stuff than have it every night and have this inferior, and since then I have heard it over and over and over. Well, but it's still ice cream. Well, this isn't as tasty as real barbecued chicken. It's shake and bake barbecued chicken. Oh, yeah, but it's still barbecued chicken and it's December. And isn't that wonderful to have barbecued chicken in December?
No, it's not.
No, it's not. No, it's not. And so in the wintertime, I will forgo tomatoes. I won't even bother. Why would I? I can make fabulous grated salads, vegetable slaws. I can take cabbage and make coleslaw. I can grate carrots and golden beets and chioggia beets and salad turnips and a little bit of celeriac. Add a little bit of grated carrot, toss in a few raisins, put on a light vinaigrette dressing, and I guarantee you it will be far tastier than any iceberg washed out lettuce that you can get in January and a totally tasteless leather tomato.
It tastes like an iceberg.
Yeah. And, green onions that have no bite and radish that have no zing. And, no, it's not worth it. To me, a potato salad is the reason you have potato salad in the summer is potato salad made with new potatoes,
Oh my goodness, yes.
fresh green onions out of the garden, and young, sharp tasting radishes. Anything else just pales by comparison. It's like in the middle of winter, boil those potatoes up and give them all the help they can with butter and bacon bits and shredded cheese and anything else you can give them to help them taste like, much better. But at the height of summer when they are lovely and new, no, 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 enjoy them then.
So we're really encourage you to become Epicureans because tasting food is one of the greatest pleasures that I think our culture is missing out. And of course, it's not just the taste, it's the nutrient value that gives you the taste, right? It's the all the phyto whatever and the little goodies that give you that extra zing on the tip of your tongue.
I have a friend, she's featured on our calendar. Her name is Sherry Roy, and she does tower gardens. So she grows fresh fruit or fresh vegetables all winter long. And somebody was trying to, she was trying to explain it to somebody one time, and she was like, no matter how good the food you get at the farmer's market is, it's not like walking over to the vine, picking a tomato, picking a cucumber, and turning them into supper that night.
That's true.
And she's right. She's 100% right that there is, the minute you pick that food off the vine, you have diminished it.
Right. And the longer it sits without being processed, the more diminished it gets.
And I was taught as a teenager how wonderful it was to put the pot of water on to boil, go out to the garden, gather the corn, take the husks off of it, and bring it back to the kitchen and throw it in the water that is now boiling. And it is like you do that once and you go, oh, it's like a different food group. It is so much better.
That's why, as a kid, we always traveled with a salt shaker in our back pocket.
I have a friend who says the same thing that he traveled with a salt shaker in his back pocket because you never knew when you were going to have to steal a tomato out of the garden.
That's right, and we were darn good at it.
Yeah. So, the connection to food, it's one of the most important things about gardening. It is far more important than the skill
Yes.
of gardening. One of the reasons why I do the garden date book and I do the calendar and I teach the classes is because I really want people's gardens to succeed. The most common thing I hear from new gardeners is something along the lines of, well, my 10-year-old wanted a garden, so she and I, changed one of the flower beds into a little vegetable garden. We had a great deal of fun with it. It was absolutely awesome, but really, we only got some Swiss chard out of it. Nothing else really grew. And that always makes me feel rather sad because, you were out there, you were having a good time, that was, and so I did this so that people could succeed. But I want you to know that whether you succeed at gardening or not, or whether you bring in a bumper crop of tomatoes, or you stand there at the end of the season looking at the plants, wondering why.
What happened, right?
What happened? Why didn't they produce even one tomato? In terms of what that gardening has done for your soul, what it's done for your peace of mind, one year I went through just a really tough time. Like there was so many things that happened that year. My son was diagnosed with an untreatable condition that did result in his blindness as he grew up. I was in a relationship that was disintegrating at the speed of light. I was broke. I was caught betwixt and between with my social work career because everything was going to contract and there was like virtually, it was it was a particularly sharp season in hell. And I have things, but primarily it was potato patch. And we got 3 nights of frost in the middle of July, and I knew by the second morning that I wasn't getting any potatoes out of that patch. The tops were all dead. And that, but I persisted in going out there and working at this and working at that. And this friend of mine one day, like, "Well, why? Why do you like you go out there and you seem really upset, and you seem really angry." And I said, "Yeah, but not so much at the potatoes. I know, that this has happened in the garden, but I need an outlet. I need to go somewhere where I can pound and chop and kick and rant and rave and stomp, and I'm not hurting anybody's feelings, and I'm not getting in anybody's way, and I'm not doing any harm to anybody or anything. I'm just like blowing off steam." And we laughed about it. But um, if you can do rage crying, trust me, you can do rage gardening.
Yeah, and there's the other end of it too, and that's making passionate love to nature in your garden too, and taking the
Like,
time in a hammock or having tea under the fruit trees and just admiring nature growing in front of you. So yeah, there's both ends of the scale, right?
there were, and that was also the garden that one night, this was up in northern Alberta, so evening came quick in the fall. And I was out harvesting the few little things that I was getting. And there was an old abandoned house on the property that owls were nesting in. And my evening in the garden ended with me standing out there like this, like a scarecrow, with the baby owl swooping under my arm.
Wow, what an experience.
It was amazing. The owls were teaching their babies to fly, and they were so comfortable with my presence that I became part of the avoidance games that they were teaching. And it was so soul healing. It was
Yeah.
so wonderful that even though I thought I was just working frustrations out in this garden, I wasn't. I was actually getting a lot more out of it. So, anybody can garden. You don't have to be a success at gardening to get so much in the way of beneficial energy and exchange out of that garden.
Yeah, so stop being hard on yourself and stop trying to measure everything and as the poundage coming out of your garden is a mark of your success. No, it's that you're cultivating your inner nature garden. You're opening your soul with a lot of love and letting the light shine inside of yourself. That's where the healing's happening, right?
Yes, massive production is seldom the point of a home garden, especially the first few years. Don't make it your watermark. You don't need to do that to yourself.
I think Darlene was saying, because there was no potatoes because the little critters ate them all, right? And she said, yeah, and we spent $60 on the hay and it didn't work. Yeah. So yeah, it can be expensive the first time around as you're learning, but that's just
I
the way it
was
is.
devastated. The first 2 feet, we were getting beautiful big potatoes. And then we got into where the moles were. And I could get my arm in right up to my shoulder into those mole tunnels. Like, they did an amazing job.
Yeah, they're very good at it.
Yeah, they really are incredibly good at it. They had a mole super highway, and I was livid. But we now know that gardening in it, that because of the underground dwellers, that your potatoes are going to need to be done in containers, or if we put them in a raised bed, we're going to put a wire bottom in that
At the
raised
bottom. And in
bed.
fact, that's what I want to have James come, even with the ones we have. We just take out all the good dirt and then we lay literally a basket of wire, right? And then we put the dirt back in.
Absolutely, absolutely. It's going to be the only way you're going to defeat those moles and voles and other underground critters.
Yeah.
I could not believe the size of those tunnels. I have seen rabbit warrens smaller than that.
Oh, they're very good. And my cat used to be very, very good, but she's getting older. She used to be quite the hunter down there. But even one cat can't take care of the level of moles down there, right?
Need a Jack Russell Terrier.
Yeah, and it's the closer it is to the fence, the more drastic the damage, right?
Yep. Oh yeah, because the soil there is nice and deep.
Yeah.
We saw that your upper bed didn't do hardly anything at all. And the further down we went, the further we went down the hill, the better the soil was, and the higher the mole population was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, up top you can't drill through the rock, so it's a little hard for them to get into the.
Exactly.
Well, we're near
Oh,
the top of the hour, and again, I don't know where the time goes, but here we are, just about ready to call it another go around. So, what do we have in store for next week?
well, next week I think we really need to talk a lot about perennial food crops that we get all excited about the annuals, and they are great, but you're taking a look in your yard, for instance, at the blackberries, the strawberries, the raspberries, the fruit trees, the asparagus patch.
Mm.
You got a Swiss chard patch going for you that'll come back for you year after year after year. And I think we need to take a look at the
And the kale
perennial
patch, yeah, the kale patch.
the perennial food crops
Yeah.
that can just going come hell or high water. They're really good survival foods, and given the crop failures and the erratic summers that we're getting, I think more and more people need to start really paying attention to the perennial crops.
That makes perfect sense. They're
Yeah.
self-seeding, they take care of themselves. Basically, good soil and watering is all they need, and a little love and tenderness. What could be better than that?
Yeah, exactly.
No
So that
fuss, no muss agriculture.
you got it.
Right.
Yeah. Let the land feed you.
Yeah. So when in doubt, go lie in the hammock.
See y'all next week.
Yeah. Bye for now. Happy gardening.